Welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar. My name is Nikki Sunga and I am the sales manager here in MRTC Software. I'm the host here and I have here MRTC Software which is the leading provider of software. Today we will be presenting the tips for managing your data efficiently in 2022 with the practical aspects. So just a little housekeeping before we get started. If you have any questions during the presentation, please type them into the question box in your Zoom box. So I'll bring them up during the presentation and we will also have time for questions at the end. Now, without further ado, we will turn the time over to our presenter, which is Mr. Phil Hearn. Phil Hearn is our director, CEO, and a software of our company, and we will be doing all the presentation today. So Phil, hello Phil.
Hello there. Thanks, Nikki. Well, thank you all for joining us today. As I often say at the beginning of these webinars, good morning if you're on my side of the world, and good afternoon if you're on the other side of the world, or perhaps if you're in America. I'm sorry to disturb your sleep. So today we're going to be looking at managing data efficiently. And in the last webinar, and if you missed that recording is available. Nikki will be sending that link round after this webinar, so you can look back at that. But in this second part of the webinar, we're looking much more at sort of the practical aspects of it. And I was really pleased with the last webinar, the first part. We don't always get loads of feedback from webinars, but actually I got some really positive feedback and some different thoughts from people. And I'd encourage that again here. I think perhaps today's webinars are going to pose more questions and answer your questions. The idea of this webinar is to sort of get you thinking and consider what's important to you and your clients. And if you think we can help, to contact us and see if we can perhaps suggest ways to come up with practical solutions to any problems that you've got with data processing or handling data. So it was a really good webinar last time, so good feedback, and I'd appreciate feedback from this one as well, positive or negative. I'm always happy with getting feedback. So just a sort of very quick summary of the last webinar. This is not really covering every point that was made in that last webinar by any means, but it's just a sort of bullet points of things that came out of that webinar. I think one of the things that I tried to get over at the last thing, that changes are taking place in the way that we process data in market research. I think, that historically we've been very straight line in our processing in market research, and that our history is field work, some tables, and maybe a report on the back of that, whether that's in PowerPoint or a Word document or similar. That tends to be the way that market research has been done historically. Now that's changing, and changing very quickly, because the paths that data take now can be much more varied, and there can be more things on the end of that straight line, such as putting data into a dashboard now so that people can navigate it and explore their data more fully. But there's also feeding in other data from different software, such as sales figures, other targets, KPIs, and that sort of thing. And I think there's research data is becoming much more integrated with other business data, which then, of course, that puts a pressure on market research to respond to that and have the right tools available so that you can deliver what clients want, rather than perhaps as we had traditionally, given clients a report, or perhaps access to data, or put something in PowerPoint summarizing a market research survey. Now, one of the things I also talked about, and I'm going to cover a little bit today, and I'll go on to today's presentation in just a moment, is that there's a real wide range of software available now. There's, I don't know how many products now serve the market research industry, but it must be well into the hundreds. And they range from being sort of all-in-one packages that do everything from data collection through to some reporting. Some do specialist things, perhaps they just do collect online survey data, CATI, whatever it might be. Some just do tabulations. But there's a real range of software also, not just in functionality, but in terms of how complex they are both to use and what they're capable of. And again, that mirrors what's going on in market research. The most common questionnaire I get now is on my phone. If I use a hotel, I get a 3-question questionnaire, which is to produce net promoter scores eventually. And that doesn't need particularly sophisticated software to be able to give me 3 simple questions that I can answer. Whereas other people want to do surveys that have quite complex questionnaires with nice graphics and so on. And that in turn means that the range of software that people need and use ranges from quite basic, but not nonetheless very good at doing the basics, right through to sophisticated tools that do something to a very high standard, but need a lot more skill to use and probably have a much higher ticket price. And one of the things I mentioned in that last webinar was the importance of not getting trapped in the software that you use. I think there's an increasing need to have multiple products that then can connect together well. And I'm going to be talking about that today, products that connect badly and products that connect well. And when you're connecting data between platforms, because that's something that's going to increase, I think, because we're going to need as a business to take on more different types of data and deliver more different types of deliverables. It's important that when data is transferred between one platform or another, that's a nice, clean, easy process that doesn't take you hours of time to improve. And I have sort of witnessed people sitting with imports from other software systems, and it takes them hours to get the data into shape so that it can be used in the product of their choice. And that's often a hidden cost that people don't see, because people who work in DP are just very, very good typically at getting a job done. And management doesn't always realise the time or effort that goes into that. They might be vaguely aware that things are taking a bit longer than they might like, but there's perhaps not that communication and understanding why things are taking so long. So I think that's certainly a topic that's going to come out today. Now, a little bit, this is going to be very short, this PowerPoint beginning. We're going to be looking at software most of this session. But just to say what this webinar is not, before I go on to say what it is, it's not a demo of our software. It is a demo of our software because I'm going to be using our products to show you some of the points I want to make during the course of this webinar. But it's not meant as, if you like, a sales presentation of our demo to any extent whatsoever. I'm really not showing you all the functionality. I'm not trying to show you some of the tricks that you can do. I'm using our software just because I've got licenses to use it, and to illustrate points that I think are important when you consider moving data around in the world. So if you've got an interest in our software, of course, I'd be delighted to hear from you all later, or Nikki will as well. But really today is using our software not to demonstrate its functionality or its benefits too much, but really more to exemplify things that I think are important in the survey process. But of course, we'd love you to buy our software, of course, just like anyone else. So let's go on to what it is. So we're going to be looking at processes, and I'm going to walk you through some of the typical processes that you encounter. And I'm going to contradict myself here. I'll admit this from the start. I talked about market research not being a straight line process anymore, and there's lots of things that come off that now and bolt onto it, and you want to feed in. But for the purposes of this webinar, I'm going to sort of go in a bit of a straight line, because otherwise I'll be just jumping all over the place, and I think it will start to get quite hard to follow. So I'm going to look at different aspects of the survey process, from collecting data through to analysing data, through to reporting and dashboarding data. So they're the sort of topics I'll be covering. So it will look more like a straight line, but I'd encourage you not to think straight line anymore. Try and think about what you want to do and what your clients want you to do in that. So we're going to be identifying considerations and the needs that I think you have from modern market research software. So as I said, I'm going to start by looking at the collection process. Now, I will tell you what products I'm showing you here as I go through this, and these are either our own products or products that we sell for. And the first product I'm going to be looking at is Snap, and that's a data collection platform that can handle surveys online, and then goes on to do some more things. It does some tabulations, some charts, and some reporting as well. So if I just sort of, this is actually a video this time because I want this to run at high speed. I'm just going to talk over this, but you can see what's happening here is that we're putting together a questionnaire. Again, you needn't follow the principle that everything that's going on here. It's not a demonstration of the software. It's showing you the type of software that it is. And the thing about this software is that you'll know it's all done by using clicking and a mouse. I wish I could work at that speed. I'm afraid I don't. And not many other people could. You can tell I've sped up the video. But you can see there's tools in there to do some quite sophisticated things. And you can see here, for example, a line's being drawn around an area on a map so that that can be assigned to a code. So there's some quite sophisticated tools available within Snap, but they're all carried out within a graphical user interface using a mouse and a keyboard to do all that work. Now, this is different to some types of data collection platforms, perhaps your first consideration when you're using any software, and that is that there are two types of software that are out there, and there are some hybrids, of course, that sit in the middle, where you can either do things through a graphical interface or you can do them through a scripting language. And these are quite different worlds. Those that use a scripting language will generally need skilled staff that can do those sorts of things for you, so that will need the training. The product will tend to be more expensive, whereas if you do things through a menu-driven system or a graphical interface, it's a lot simpler and training is much lower. Using the software tends to be intuitive, and once you've done one or two projects, you tend to be able to do 95% of all your work without really any help whatsoever. So there are two types of software. There are some hybrids that sit in the middle. I'm not often very keen on hybrid software. I think one thing or the other is better because it suits the type of user who's going to use it. But there are these two types of software, and they come with different prices, as I say, typically. But they also mean that a scripting language will give you, not literally, but almost capabilities of doing pretty much anything or a lot more than a graphical user interface that will have its limitations. But again, there are some menu-driven systems or graphical GUI systems that have a lot of features in there. And sometimes the number of features can be quite overwhelming and require you to learn where all the things are within the software to be able to use them efficiently. So that's a first consideration, I think, considering what type of software suits you and suits your work you're trying to achieve. And some products have upgrade paths so that you can move from a user interface to a scripting language. And I'm not particularly doing a sales thing here, but we have that with our own software. For example, our tabulation software, you can use MRDCL through a user interface in a product that has a separate name called QPS, which broadly does the same thing as MRDCL, the scripting language. They're using the same engine, but there's just a lot more things you can do in MRDCL because it's a scripting language, and QPS is effectively a subset of the things that you can do in MRDCL, but being addressed through a user interface. Now, there are some products that do that, and the balance between what you can do in those two things will vary between the user interface products and the scripting languages. There are some products that sort of purport to be user interface products, but actually they don't do anything hardly. You have to use the scripting language rather for pretty much everything that you do. All right, so that was a quick look at the differences between those types of software. The next thing I want to move on to, and I'm going to spend a bit of time on, is the business of moving data between platforms. And I'm going to do this, I'm going to kick up our MRDCL central software here. And if I could just open this up, there we go. And what I want to talk about now is the ease of moving data between platforms. I think it's becoming almost imperative that you use more than one platform unless you have a very concise and clear requirement or type of business that you're running. And what I want to talk about here is getting data from one platform to another and how easy that is, and thinking about how easy that is. So in my first example here, I'm going to take some data. You can see here in MRDCL that there's an icon here that lets me import data from SPSS. That's the SPSS logo, if you don't recognize it. And SPSS and SSS are becoming the two most common ways of moving data between platforms. So if I click on this, there's a lot of options here. I'm just going to click on this one. I'll explain this in a bit more detail in a minute. And I'm going to import a project that may have come from any data collection platform, because many of them output data in an SPSS SAD file. I click on that and I open it and I import. And you can see here, I now get an MRDCL script. Now, if you're familiar with MRDCL, that will all look very familiar to you. If you've never seen MRDCL before, you might think this is a foreign language you're looking at, and you'll be quite close to being correct there, in fact, in that you can see this is all a language that's been generated. But what I want to highlight here is that it's imported the questions. You can see question 1 here. You can see question 2. You can see question 3. There's a lot of syntax in between here, which if you're not with MRDCL, ignore that for now. It's not what I'm here to train you on or talk to about. And you can see I've got some other questions here, Q51 down to Q510. These are rating scales and some more things down here. And it might look quite impressive that I can just click the run button here and I've got a set of tables. I'm looking at these in a text format. I could look at them in an Excel spreadsheet, but you could see there very quickly I've gone from importing the data and I've got some top line counts. Obviously, I might want to put some banners on this to make it a bit more interesting or more informative. But you can see I've got some tables. But if we go further down, you can see it's not quite as good as I would like it. So you can see here when I import the brands for this multi-response question here for question 5, I get brand A, no, 34%, yes, 31%. Brand B, I got the same thing. This is not very usable, to be honest. I mean, I don't particularly want to have a table for every single brand. It's really not very useful to have. So that's the sort of first level of import that many software packages might limit you to, that you'll get whatever it happens to import from SPSS, and then you'll find that what you've imported is not particularly useful. I couldn't send these clients to these tables to a client now or put them into a report because they're not in the form I want. So what I look for when I'm moving data between software is something that's another level up from that. And the next sort of level up would be to have some control of what's going in when I import the data. So this is the way MRDCL Central does it. Now, this is not the only way of doing things, but you can see here that I've got some sort of template behind this now. So you can see a list of all my questions. It tells me what type of question they are. And I have set this up before the session, by the way. This wasn't automatic. I did this yesterday. But you can see I'm ignoring certain questions. But more importantly, when I get to question 5, I want to put it together as a multi, because one of the weaknesses of SPSS rather is that it doesn't really handle multi-response questions properly. It holds them as lots of single questions, as yeses and nos, which is why my first import came through in a fairly unuseful way. So now things are a lot better, because when I've got, what will happen now is this will combine Q5 together as one variable, so that when I tabulate it or analyze it or put it into a report, everything's going to be in one place. So let's just import that using this control here. Okay, so now what I've got question 5 now as one question, which is much better, and question 6 as one question, which means now that if I run this, I'll get tables that are much more useful. And if I export this off into some other software, you can see I've got that as one nice tidy table. And that is something I could send to a client, or I could put into a dashboard or do whatever I wanted to, and it would work absolutely fine. So I've already made one improvement there to what I had originally. So let's just go back and look at this. Now, when I go on a bit further here, you'll see that question 7 was some rating statements, criteria 1, criteria 2, and so on. Now, that's all right. That looks quite good. That's all worked. It's produced me a table for question 7A, 7B, 7C. That all worked absolutely fine. But what would be more useful is if I could have that in some form so that when I edited it, it would be easy for me to edit. So let me just go back and import this once more as a third version. I'm just going to change a setting over here now. Now what I'm going to do, I'm going to change the setting here to concise. So what this would mean at the moment is if I wanted to put a top 2 box in there, for example, I'll have to edit every single question for it to work, which would be time consuming. And if there was 100 rating statements, it would be, I would say, incredibly boring. So let's have another go now. Let's open up again. And this time I'm going to pick this and import again. Okay, now this time, this will look much more complex. This script will look familiar to an MRDCL user. But what I want to do here is explain the principle. Now you can see that all my question 7 information is enclosed in this little bit of code here. So in a statement, I've got a list of the questions, 7A, B, C, D, and E. If there are 100 of them, it will go right up to 7, whatever it would be, the 100th letter, which goes around to AA after the 26th letter. But everything's in a nice tidy loop now. So when I've imported this time, if I wanted to put a top 2 box in, it would just take me just a couple of seconds to go 1 to 2, add a label in here, top 2, save it. And if I run it now, look at my tables, you can see the rest of these tables on the brands look good, but just in seconds, I've managed to get a top 2 box on all my statements. So here we're looking at what I call a really clean import. And I think this is something that you need to consider. I've shown it in our software here, but I think it's something that to be considered for any links between software that you might want to do, that the import needs to be clean. And what it also means here, this is an important point, let's say the supplier of this data realized they'd made a mistake, or they perhaps added another 300 records. I don't want to have to go through the process of updating everything again. I want it to be more or less, if not automatic, but pretty much automatic. So what's important here is that I can automate the whole process. So if more data is supplied, maybe it's another wave of a tracking study, maybe it's corrected data because the supplier or the team that collected the data made a mistake in what they supplied, the whole thing can be rerun with one click, because I have seen people when they've had data resupplied perhaps spend a few hours getting their data in a nice tidy state so that they've got things like top 2 boxes that I'm showing here, but then have to do it all again if there's an error, and that really isn't very acceptable. Again, I've not really shown you MRDCL to its full potential here at all, because I haven't got time to do that, but I could have kept these changes to the top 2 box that I put in there in a little piece of code so that it automatically used it when I re-imported. I haven't done it here, I've just done it on the import. So there's some things to look at when you're importing data or moving how clean that operation is and how easy it is to redo it, because hours can be wasted if that's a problematic thing. We also do imports ourselves into Triple S, and I think that's another good way of working. So if I wanted to import this data in Triple S, I can do that. Whoops, I've gone to the wrong folder doing that. So here's that same import in Triple S. Item 4, and Triple S is actually in some ways a step better because it understands the types of variables that are in there, so that when we import from Triple S, we get the same tables and it's a nice, smooth, easy path. And indeed, we have that with our QPS software that we sell, that also imports nice and tidily. And if I want to put any extra things in here, I can do that very, very easily. Now, if I want to start putting banners in, that should be something that's very easy to do. I'm not going to demonstrate it here, but I could easily put a banner in here in a few seconds and get a complete set of tables cross-analysed by each variable. So just as getting data in is important, it's equally important, of course, that you can get data out. I'm going to use the classic version of MRDCL now. So there's another part to MRDCL, and that has tools in it, as does indeed the interface I was using just now, that can automate exports. So one thing that we do in our software is I could have set up there a whole step of processes that link together, which would have read the data in, ran some tables, formatted those tables into charts, and then gone on and exported the data to another platform. So all of those things could be tied together in our platform. And those sorts of things are really important because they reduce user error, because once you've got it right, next time you run it, it becomes a click and the chances of an error become infinitely lower than where humans have got to interact and do the whole thing manually again. So let's look at exporting data now. And I think controlling exports is just as important as being able to control imports. So if you want to export that data we saw just now that I just imported, I think it's from Triple S just now, what we have here, we have a list of different exports, and I really think it's important that as many exports as possible are available these days. But the sort of thing that I expect software to have is to control what happens to those exports. So some products just dump out every single question, including the questions you don't want, or even things that are collected during data entry, like emails, addresses, times of interviews, length of interviews, all sorts of admin data that you really don't need when it comes to processing the results. So controlling what's exported, I think, is quite important. The way we do that in our software, it's not the only way of doing it, is to let you make a file that contains all the variables. So I just clicked there and made a file that let me produce a list of the variables. And if I want to delete, so say I wanted to hide that question, I could just take that question out. And if I wanted Q8 to be at the beginning, because that's the most important question to the client, I could move that to the front. So we have tools in our software to let you reorder things and change things, so that if I select that file, when I come to export, and let's export it, which we export it to back to Triple S, for example. And if I open up the XML file that I made there, which I think is this one here, WordPad, you should be able to see now that question 8 is my first question because I reordered it. And if I scroll down, question 7a has disappeared. It goes from question 6 to 7b. So it looks as though I did that thing right, which was better than my effort earlier on. So controlling what you output from the software is just as important as what you are able to read in, and how cleanly you can read that in, how you export it, what you export, and without limitations if possible. I know some software where we've had files that had to come in about 5 parts or 5 chunks because there is so much data or so many fields in the data that it breaks some sort of arbitrary limit. So being able to control all those things is really important, and you know, I would advise you to consider that when you're working with any platforms or considering any platforms. Now let's have a look at something else. I'm going to go back to MRDCL Central now. I'm jumping around a little bit. What I'll look at now is the business of not just reading data or exporting data, but actually merging some data. So I'm actually going to go into Excel here. Now, the challenge here is, and I think this is something that's increasing and we're getting a lot more questions from people about, is how do I merge spreadsheet data that I've got into my survey data? So this is data that's come from 50 sales regions. So there we are, 50 rows in that particular spreadsheet, or 51 with the header. And these are the sales of brand A, brand B, brand C, and they're split down. I think it's actually by gender and age, actually. I think these are the number by first gender, second gender, first age group, second gender, sorry, first age group, second age group. It could be regions, it could be value customer, it could be some other classification about your customers. But here we've got a spreadsheet of information that is probably not atypical, which are sales, or it could be some other, it could be monetary, obviously, rather than numbers. And you can tell they're random numbers by the patterns within them. But I want to be able to read that data in and process it with tables. And I think this is an increasing need, and perhaps I am doing a bit of selling here and demonstrating of what MRDCL can do. So I'll contradict what I said at the beginning. This wasn't a survey software demonstration. But what I want to show you here is that you can get survey data into MRDCL, and this is something I think that's increasingly important and something that we've added into our software. So when I run the tables here, you'll see, and I'll show you them again in text format here, but you can see I've got the survey data in these rows here. So there's the survey data, the percentage of people for each of these age groups. But this is the data that came from that spreadsheet that I showed you. So the cells here have all been calculated direct from that spreadsheet. And so if the spreadsheet changed, the figures in here changed as well. And then what I've got here is a table that summarizes that data side by side. So what we've got is the brand A data in terms of the survey data and the sales data alongside it. Now, what that means is if I drop that data into Excel, which I can do, I can very easily produce something like that. I can get a chart which shows, here we are, there's that table now in an Excel format. There's the figures I just showed you with the brand, I think it says here it's awareness. I think it had a different question just now, but forgive me for that. So there's the survey data in that column. There's the sales data that came directly through from that spreadsheet. And if I got a new spreadsheet with updated sales figures, I could just press a button, run that, and this chart can be recreated with the latest figures. So those sorts of tools are becoming more and more important, and products like MRDCL that can merge together that type of external data and survey data, I think are getting more important, because more and more in market research, we're being asked to merge different sources of data together. Now, just finally, before I close, just a couple more things. I've talked about the ways of connecting data together. I've shown you SPSS, and I've also talked about SSS, and they're probably the most two common ways that we link data between survey platforms. And they both have their strengths. SPSS is a proprietary product, but it's increasingly used as a medium, if you like, for linking data between platforms. Triple S, which started in the 1990s and has been improved in that time, has been a very good way for different market research software packages to link together. And it does have that advantage that it knows what a multi-response question is and keeps all the answers to the multi-response question tied together neatly, whereas SPS doesn't do that so well. But there is a new kid on the block that's coming, and I'd ask you to have a look at if you're interested in moving survey data. And I mentioned it last week, and there's a bit more about it in last week's webinar if you missed it. And that's SAPI, that's TSAPI, which is on tsapi.net. And that is going to come, hopefully, an API that will let you link platforms together, hopefully inside and outside market research. So it's in its early stages at the moment, but it's something I think that will grow, and I think market research companies and market research software suppliers should support because I think it's the future, and it will mean that you can have a repository online of your projects, give logins to relevant people so that they can access that data, and they should be able to pull it in then, your survey data, into whatever platform that might be. And that won't necessarily just be market research platforms. That will go on to be business information systems and all sorts of other software that wants to pull in data from external sources. So it really does sort of widen what market research can offer as a business. All right, so finally, I'm going to look and talk briefly about dashboards. I'm not going to spend too long on this. I've actually got a link here. Now I'm using a product that's not ours at all, but I'm using Displayer for this one, which is certainly one of the, I think, better online dashboard systems that are available. And you can see here, I've got the data that you've seen a few times now in different places in a dashboard. And I think there's some things to say about dashboards, that there's a difference between dashboards that you want to produce, not automatically, but semi-automatically. Obviously, they've got to be designed to hold the data that you require, but they're easy to do. You can connect data to them easily, and to put the dashboard together quickly is not a long process. But there is also a requirement where you go up the complex end, where you perhaps want to use something like Tableau, where you can do pretty much everything you want to do, but it's again a complex product to use and needs a lot of learning. And they come with very different prices, these types of software as well, because they range from $2,000 or $3,000 a year, I think, to up to $100,000 or more a year. So there's a big range in the sort of software that's available for producing dashboards, and you do have to consider whether you want to, how far you want to go with that, and what your clients demand in terms of that. And again, they're easy to set up versus quite complex to set up. Where dashboards get most difficult, I think, is where there's a mixed user base, actually, who's going to be using the dashboard. I always find that the biggest challenge, where you perhaps got the classic example where you've got the CEO who just wants to see the top figures and perhaps click on one or two buttons, and then somebody who's working in a particular department who wants to navigate the data and explore it in great depth. The biggest problem with dashboards typically is that they're containers, and they limit you to whatever's in that dashboard. But let's have a quick look at this dashboard here. I think I'm a big fan of Displayer. I think it's nice what it does. It's reasonably easy to use. And it lets me, for example, put filters on here. So if I want to just choose males who are 25 to 44 there, I can just click on those two things, and you can see now it's updating, and all those figures up here are updated, and the females have gone away. So it's very easy to change this, and I get comparative figures down here. They all obviously update, and if I can take a filter off, and I can pick a couple of regions here and do the same thing, and you can see it refreshes and updates automatically, and you can see it's ranking things here automatically, and all these things changed as well. So that's what I call a sort of, easy to use, very easy to set up, but user friendly. but still with a plenty of tools in it. I call this certainly a good upper mid-range piece of dashboard software. And one of the things I like is that you can just drop this into a PDF or a PowerPoint report. I'll drop it into a PDF this time, and I think that will give me a file that I can open up. Still doing it. Here we are. Here's the PDF, and you can see now that's my header sheet that it's produced, and now I've got a capture of that filter there applied with these regions and for the mail. So again, that's quite useful and quite easy to use. And I actually do like the fact that you get these reports out so easily. So that's a sort of brief sort of introduction to handling dashboards. But that again covers quite a wide range. Now, again, it's important that getting data in there is easy, and that that process isn't something that takes a long time, and that you can do all the simple things that you want in the dashboard quickly. So I think at that point I'm going to take a pause. As I say from this webinar, I haven't really covered everything I wanted to, everything that I could possibly cover in this webinar. It's not that sort of webinar. It's really a webinar where I'm trying to get you to ask yourself questions. But having said that, I'm available now. If you want to ask me any questions, I'll do my best to answer them. But what I've tried to do here in a sort of 40-minute period is to give you some things to think about and exemplify how important it is to be able to move data from one place to the other smoothly and efficiently. So fire away if you've got any questions, and Nikki, I think, will be on hand to tell me whether any questions have come in.
Okay, thank you, Phil, for that wonderful presentation. So we will go ahead and take some time for questions now. So just a reminder, please be sure to type your question into the question box in your control panel. So it looks like we have a quick few questions here for you, Phil. Okay. So the first is, will CHAPI mean that dashboards can be automatically generated?
I suppose it will depend on the software that you're using to generate the dashboard. The idea of SAPI is that it's something that will let you put your survey data into a format that other products can, if I use the word, zap in automatically. What the product that's zapping that data in automatically does with it, whether it creates a basic dashboard and what it finds in the SAPI file or not, will depend on the software you use. But it should certainly make the updating, I would expect it to make the updating of that dashboard automatic, so that, for example, if you ran a survey with 500 respondents and produced a dashboard in another piece of software, it would be either automatic or really just a button press, but hopefully automatic, that the dashboard would update if you added another 500 records and had 1,000 records. So it would depend on the software you're using for your dashboarding, but it would certainly offer the capability to automate a lot more. And certainly when it's refreshed with new data, that should be, or could be, I would expect in most platforms to be automatic. So I hope that helps.
Okay, so I have here the second question. Is SPSS better for transferring data than SSS?
I'm not sure better is the word I use. There are more, one thing I have observed, there's an increasing number of data collection platforms that have come on the market. I don't know how many there are now. I used to sort of say there were 50 to 100. I'm sure it's more than 100 now. And they all have different levels of complexity, but I have noticed an increasing trend for them to store data in SPS, or their default way of transferring data to other platforms is through SPSS rather than SSS. The advantage of Triple S is that it knows what multi-response questions are and knows a few more things about data than SPSS does. But SPS has some powerful tools in it so that you can get at the data model and program what you like, but you might need to be a more sophisticated user to do that, of SPSS that is. So I wouldn't say one's better than the other. SPSS perhaps offers more if you've got a team skilled in programming to read SPSS or use SPSS itself. Triple S is more restrictive, I guess, or is more of a clear, specific format, which makes it easy to move from one thing to another. But SPSS is becoming more prevalent at the moment, I think, in online platforms. And indeed, I think Displayer, can take both, but I think is better with SPSS when it gets cleaner imports. Talked about cleaner imports earlier. I'm hoping that SAPI is the solution, but I'm probably talking 2 years ahead before that becomes the top number one of those three options as well. But I encourage you to start looking at SAPI as a better method ultimately.
Okay, so the third question we have here is, can you give us a tip? What tips do you have for assessing on how good a software product is for making data easy to reuse?
Data easy to use?
Yes.
Yeah. I think I tried to pull some of those things over in the presentation today. You know, how not just how easy is it to get stuff out, but how easy is it to get stuff in. I know there's software out there, and I won't name the names, but where they're very keen to trap you into this. Well, they've got all the imports in the world to make it get the data in, but then you can't get it out again. And I think connectivity is really important. You know, I just think if you're looking at other bits of software, set a challenge, set that software company, say, I want to know how long it takes to get my survey data into your platform and out into, let's say, SPSS or something like that, or whatever it might be, into some other, or into Excel or something like that. Set a test, and if you do tracking studies, for example, which I think is something that too many companies claim they do tracking studies well, and I think most of software products do tracking studies badly. You know, set a test where you want to then see how difficult it is to get the next wave's data in when there's one question added and one removed. Is that easy, or is that starts to become a problem and that there's a whole lot of work to do if that happens, because that's what really happens on a tracking study. So I think rather than giving tips, well, I've given some tips, I think, during the webinar, but I think rather than specifics, I'd rather say, look at what you do and set challenges to companies. They haven't got to be big surveys. I mean, today I've demonstrated a survey of 8 questions. Imagine that if that survey was 800 questions, it would be 100 times more work to do than what I demonstrated today. So, you know, how easy would these things be to do? And just set a task that's representative of what you do. I think then you can learn a lot more, because if it's something that you can go click, 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 done, or it just reads it in and you've got pretty much what you want, and within 10 minutes or something, you're functioning, that's a lot different, you know, if you have to go through a process where I know I've seen people sort of spend, you know, a whole day just fiddling with an import to make it right for what they want to do in their next product they want to use it with. So hopefully that helps. So it's a slightly woolly answer, I agree. But if we can help further and you have specifics, please, you know, ask perhaps a more direct question.
Okay, great. So I have here one question for you again. If I collect data and confirm it, what other software would I need?
I'm a bit out of touch with Confirm It these days. I know it's a very complete data collection product. I know it can do some analysis and some reporting. I don't know its sophistication. I have seen some things in it which I think it does well, and some things that I think it perhaps doesn't do very well. But I'm not an expert in it, so I can't answer that question, wouldn't want to answer that question. But I think it's what it does for you, what things in it. I think these are the questions you should ask, and perhaps I should have said this during the webinar. What things are pain points for you? What things either take you too long or are prone to error or don't really give your clients what you need? And then you can look at what products you need around Confirm It, if any. If Confirm It does everything you want, you don't need anything else. But if you think that things are taking too long or prone to error or don't quite deliver what your customers want, then you've got to look at getting data out of Confirm It into a product that does that better. Because if you don't, someone else will do it better, is my argument. And you might hold on to a client for 1 year, 2 years, maybe even 3 years, but eventually, if they find that someone else can do it by clicking a button, and you're spending a lot of time doing it, or you can't quite deliver what they want, that business is going to go. So I think I have written some blog articles on this topic, which if you contact us, we might be able to put in touch, link you to those blog articles. But I think thinking about what feels unwieldy are the sorts of things to think about, and what seems like a bottleneck. Look at bottlenecks and then think, if you're thinking to yourself, I wish Confirm It could do this, you're probably needing to use another product alongside Confirm It, to do that. I'm assuming, by the way, that you're totally happy with using Confirm It for data collection, because that's, in my mind, its main strength. But yeah, I can't be more specific than that because I don't know Confirm It in enough detail, really.
Okay, so I have here one last question for you, Phil. So it is dangerous to offer clients access to their data?
Well, God, great final question. I think yes, it can be, if I'm honest, but no, you can do some sensible things. I mean, again, this is something I think that the better, I'll talk about a specific here. I mean, the better dashboarding software products, for example, will allow you to stop clients who are using the data to produce a report or a chart based on less than a given number. So if you find, like I was doing my filters, I think I selected males, it was 25 to 44 or something. If I'd have picked males 25 to 44 in a particular region and there were only 5 people in that region, I wouldn't particularly want my client to look at the chart that came out saying 80% of people were totally satisfied and 20% were quite satisfied, because it's only 5 people. So I think when software has those sorts of tools, so that you can put a message up that says base too low, chart not available, or perhaps something a bit more friendly than that, I think that's good. And that's perhaps one of it's a good question, this, in some ways, because some of the more automated low-cost platforms probably wouldn't have that sort of level of sophistication in, and would just come up with a chart, and somebody who's working in a client company might not question the fact that they can go to their boss and say, well, 80% of our customers are absolutely delighted with our new product, and haven't realized that it's only 5 people that answered that particular question. So I think, it's like anything else. I think people are much more comfortable with data these days. I think 15, 20 years ago, I think people weren't used to handling data so much as they are now, and didn't have those thoughts in their heads, if you like, and just trusted the computer to tell them whatever it told them. I think people are more tech savvy now and aware of what data is. And I think you can also do some things to protect people who, perhaps should we say, reckless with what they see in their outputs. So I think on balance, I'm going to say no. But yeah, I take your point. It's important to have some caveats in there to control what's out there. But I think, what are you hiding if you're not letting your clients access to data? Are you hiding your bad research or something else? What other secrets have you got? So there isn't an excuse, I don't think, really. I think but yes, protecting clients, I think, is a better word than anything else, and making sure people don't make decisions through a little bit of carelessness on their part. So yeah, but good question. Thank you.
All right. So okay, it looks like we've covered all of our questions here, Phil.
Okay. Oh, good. Okay.
Wanted to cover before I wrap up.
So I didn't hear you then, Nikki. Say that again. Do I want to say anything before I wrap up?
Okay.
Just to say thanks for thank you for joining me today. Hopefully I've made you as an audience think of what questions are important to you. So rather than perhaps as webinars often do give you solutions, I think this one is to perhaps make you think about what things are important to you in your business and your company and your processes. So if we can help, there's an email address on there. Please write to that. It'll get through to me. If you want it to be addressed to me, my email's on the first slide. I'll be happy to answer anything or any thoughts you've got, positive or negative as well. So yeah, over to you, Nikki, to close off.
All right, thank you so much for that, Phil. Great, thank you, everyone. We appreciate you being here today. So if in case you have questions that you wanted to ask after this call, you can email phil.hearn@mrdcsoftware.com, or you can also email sales@mrdcsoftware.com, or go to our website at www.mrdcsoftware.com. And you will be receiving the recording of this webinar maybe tomorrow or later after we uploaded it, and you can also access this on our linking account. So thanks again for joining us today, and we will see you next time. Okay, thank you so much, everyone. Thank you, Phil.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Bye.
Bye.